Why German soldiers feared the T-34 tank more than any Allied weapon. It's June 1941. The Eastern Front. A German Panzer commander sits in his tank, confident his crew has just torn through Poland, France, the Low Countries. They've faced British Matildas, French Char B-1s, and crushed them all. The German war machine feels unstoppable. Then, through the dust and smoke of a Ukrainian wheat field, something appears. Low, wide, moving fast. The commander raises his binoculars. What he sees makes no sense. A tank unlike anything in the Wehrmacht's intelligence reports. Sloped armor that seems to deflect every shot. Tracks so wide it glides over mud like it's nothing. And a gun, a 76mm cannon, pointed right at him. He orders his gunner to fire. Clang, the round bounces off. He orders another shot, and another. Nothing. And then, the T-34 fires back. One shot. His Panzer III erupts in flames. In that moment, everything the Germans thought they knew about tank warfare shattered. This is the story of the T-34, the tank that changed World War II, the machine that turned the tide on the Eastern Front, and the weapon that haunted the nightmares of German soldiers more than any bomber, any rifle, any Allied weapon ever could. Because the T-34 didn't just outgun them, it outthought them. Let's go back to the beginning. Operation Barbarossa, June 22nd, 1941. 3 million German soldiers, 3,000 tanks, 4,000 aircraft. The largest invasion force in human history crashes into the Soviet Union like a steel tsunami. And for the first few weeks, it's a slaughter. Soviet forces are caught completely off guard. Entire armies are encircled. Thousands of tanks, mostly obsolete T-26 and BT-7s, are obliterated or abandoned. The Germans advance so fast their supply lines can barely keep up. Panzer crews are laughing, literally. Some of them write letters home saying the war will be over by Christmas. The Red Army seems chaotic, disorganized, weak. But then, something changes. Near the town of Raseiniai in Lithuania, a single Soviet tank appears, a KV-1. It parks itself on a road, and for 2 days, it holds up an entire German division. They hit it with anti-tank guns, artillery, even air strikes. Nothing works. It just sits there, shooting, blocking the road, unstoppable. The Germans are baffled. What kind of tanks are these? And then, in July, near the city of Dubno, they meet the T-34 for the first time. A German officer, General Ewald von Kleist, later recalled it like this: the finest tank in the world. Another veteran described it more viscerally. It was like throwing rocks at a fortress. Imagine being inside a Panzer III or IV, the backbone of the German armored forces. You've trained for this. You know your equipment. You've won battles across Europe. And now you're firing round after round at this Soviet tank, and nothing is happening. Your shots ricochet, bounce off at crazy angles. Meanwhile, that 76mm gun on the T-34 swivels toward you, and when it fires, your tank is done. One shot, catastrophic kill. Suddenly, the hunters become the hunted. So what made the T-34 so terrifying? Why couldn't the Germans stop it? 3 things: armor, mobility, firepower. Let's start with the armor. Most tanks in 1941 had vertical armor, flat plates welded together at right angles. Makes sense, right? Simple to build. But here's the problem. When a shell hits flat armor, all the energy transfers directly into the plate. If it's strong enough, it punches through. The Soviets, they said, what if we just tilted it? The T-34's armor wasn't just thick, it was sloped at extreme angles. 32 degrees on the glacis plate. The sides, the turret, even the rear, all sloped. Why does this matter? Physics. When a German armor-piercing round hit the T-34's glacis, it didn't hit straight on. It hit at an angle, which means the effective thickness of the armor more than doubled. A 45mm plate, angled at 30 degrees, becomes the equivalent of a 90mm plate. German gunners watch their shells skip off like stones on water. Now combine that with mobility. The T-34 had wide tracks, really wide. This gave it incredibly low ground pressure, meaning it could cross terrain that would bog down a German Panzer like quicksand mud, snow, swamps. The T-34 just rolled through it, and it was fast, top speed, 53 kilometers per hour. Off-road, in terrible conditions, it was still faster than most German tanks on a good day. This wasn't just convenient, this was revolutionary, because the Eastern Front wasn't Western Europe. There were no paved highways, no solid roads, just endless stretches of mud in the spring, dust in the summer, snow in the winter. The Germans called it Rasputitsa, the season of mud. Their tanks got stuck constantly. The T-34, it kept moving. And then there's the firepower. That 76.2mm F-34 gun was a beast. It could penetrate the armor of any German tank in 1941 at combat ranges. Panzer IIIs, Panzer IVs, didn't matter. One hit, and you were burning. Later in the war, when the Germans finally upgraded to the Panzer IV with the long 75mm gun and introduced the Tiger and Panther, the Soviets just upgraded too. The T-34-85, bigger turret, 85mm gun, still fast, still brutal. The T-34 evolved faster than the Germans could counter it. But here's the thing that really scared the Germans. It wasn't just that the T-34 was good, it's that there were so many of them. The Soviets built over 84,000 T-34s during World War II, 84,000. Let that sink in. For comparison, Germany produced about 6,000 Panthers, around 1,300 Tigers. The Americans made roughly 50,000 Shermans over the entire war, but 84,000 T-34s. That's not just production, that's industrial war. And here's what made it even more terrifying for the Germans. Soviet factories didn't care about comfort. They didn't care about crew ergonomics or fancy periscopes or radios in every tank. They cared about output. When the Germans invaded, the Soviets picked up entire tank factories, machinery, workers, everything, loaded them onto trains and moved them east, beyond the Ural Mountains, out of reach of the Luftwaffe. In cities like Chelyabinsk, Nizhny Tagil, and Omsk, they built these massive industrial complexes. Tankograd, they called Chelyabinsk. Tank City. Workers, many of them women and teenagers, labored in freezing conditions, sometimes 16-hour shifts, churning out T-34s. The production line never stopped. Welders worked by candlelight during power outages. If a part was missing, they improvised. Speed over perfection. One German report from 1943 captured the dread perfectly. For every tank we destroy, 2 more appear. Imagine being a German tank crew. You knock out a T-34. You're relieved. You survived. And then you see 3 more cresting the hill. You destroy those. 5 more arrive. Then 10. It's like fighting the tide. And the worst part? The Germans couldn't win the math. Even when the Tiger and Panther were introduced, tanks that could, in theory, beat the T-34 in a one-on-one fight, they were too expensive, too complicated, too slow to produce. A single Tiger cost as much as 4 T-34s, and it broke down constantly, needed specialized parts, trained crew, tons of fuel. The T-34, simple, rugged, easy to repair. You could train a crew in weeks. If the engine failed, you swapped it out in the field. Transmission broke? Fix it with a hammer. Soviet tank doctrine wasn't about having the best tank. It was about having enough tanks. And that psychological weight, knowing that no matter how many you destroyed, more were coming, it broke men. Now we need to talk about the other side of this story, because while the T-34 was a marvel of engineering, being inside one was often a death sentence. Soviet tank crews had a brutal nickname for it: the coffin. Why? The early T-34s had horrible visibility. The commander had to operate the gun, command the crew, and try to see what was happening outside. All at once, the periscopes were tiny. The hatches were hard to open. If you got hit and the tank caught fire, which happened a lot, getting out was nearly impossible. Soviet tankers knew this. They joked darkly about it. Some crews would ride on top of their tanks instead of inside, even during combat, because they'd rather risk machine gun fire than burn alive life expectancy for a T-34 crew on the front lines. Some estimates say 6 months, others say weeks. But here's the thing. They kept climbing in. Soviet soldiers had a saying, not one step back. And they meant it. The T-34 became more than a weapon. It became a symbol of resistance, of Soviet industrial might, of revenge for the atrocities the Germans committed. Every T-34 rolling off the line was a message: we will bury you. And for the Germans, that message was terrifying. Because they realized they weren't just fighting a tank, they were fighting an entire nation. By 1943, the tide of the war had turned. Stalingrad, Kursk. The Red Army was advancing, and at the tip of that advance always was the T-34. German veterans would later speak about it with a mixture of respect and fear. Some called it the best tank of the war. Others just called it a nightmare. Field Marshal von Kleist said it plainly. The T-34 was the most formidable tank we encountered. Even after the war, the T-34 kept going. It fought in Korea, in the Middle East, in Africa. Decades later, T-34s were still in service, still rolling into battle. It became the most produced tank in history, a legend. But here, on the Eastern Front, in those desperate years between 1941 and 1945, it was something more. It was hope. For the Soviets, every T-34 was proof they could fight back, that they could survive, that they could win. For the Germans, it was a harbinger, a sign that the war they thought they'd already won was slipping through their fingers, because you can't kill an idea. And the T-34 wasn't just steel and treads and gun barrels. It was the embodiment of Soviet resolve, of refusal to break, of a people who looked at the largest invasion in history and said, no, not today. So why did German soldiers fear the T-34 more than any Allied weapon? Because it was everywhere, because it wouldn't die, because every time they destroyed one, two more appeared. Because it wasn't just a tank, it was inevitability. The T-34 didn't just win battles, it won the war, and the Germans knew it. Thanks for watching. If this story pulled you in, hit that subscribe button. We've got more incredible tales from history coming your way. Drop a comment and let me know. What other World War II weapon or battle should we cover next? And if you made it this far, you're a legend. See you in the next one.